Welcome to today's rant. And I'm trying a new audio thing that I hope will make our audio better. I've got these earphones in um, that have a supposedly a better microphone. So I'm trying to get feedback on every rant so that I can improve these things. I can't get my staff to give me feedback. I ask for one every time and they won't do it. So maybe you will. I'd appreciate anything you've got to say about the sound or the visual, the video, whatever. I like to do them out on the porch out front, but I believe the Wi-Fi connection being here in the house, it's not quite as great out there. But if you'll let me know, it may work fine out there. I'll use that. But anyway, I'm just jabbering now to let those who want to get on live to go ahead and get on. But remarkable things are happening. Um, of course, more outright declaring socialists are admitting it. And before there was just about one, Bernie Sanders. There were more socialists in our government, but they weren't admitting it. Now they're being bold and they're making a big push. This is evidence that the Marxist plan for taking over America is in its very last stages. They don't come out like that about what they're doing until they think they can gain the victory. And so we, as I put in my book, I did on Marxism when I laid out the 45-point plan for Marxists to take over America, which they've been very bold and open about. It's almost 100 years old now. They actually read the plan into the congressional record. They were very out front. This is how we're going to take you over. And they've worked their plan very patiently for about 96 years now. And they're obviously doing things that make it clear they believe they are on the verge of taking over America. Now, you think that is crazy. They'll never do it. We're swinging to the right instead of the left. Perhaps. I believe we are. I think the average American is swinging more to the right, to the conservative, traditional values, loving their country, everything else. But as Marx himself said, give him 4% of the population that is, passionate and engaged, and he'll take over and dominate the 96% that are lukewarm or indifferent. And they proved that with less than 1%. He didn't prove it, but the Marxists who followed him proved it. The Bolsheviks in Russia, with less than 1% of the population, took over a country, one of the great countries of the earth at the time. Far more powerful in many ways than the United States was at the time. And but they took over Russia. And they took over, I think they have taken over now somewhere around 100 countries on the earth. Now, many of them they lost again. The people got a taste of what socialism really is, what Marxism really is, not the propaganda, but what it is really. They overthrew the Marxists. Many of them did. But there is still a high percentage. It is a revolution that has not stopped. It's been pushed back, pushed way back at times, and only uses that to fortify itself, learn the lessons, and then come back stronger than ever. I believe socialism, Marxism, Marx said that socialism, what is called socialism, is but the last step to communism. That was his understanding socialist, uh, socialism. And truly it is. They're using Marxist principles in virtually every way, trying to implement his principles, even though this has been proven over and over with every single country where it's been implemented not to work. It will only destroy a nation. It will impoverish the nation. There will only be a few of the elites who really benefit, and what they live on is what the production of everyone else. And but productivity and production will dramatically fall under Marxism, communism. It strips human beings of not only their identity, where who they are doesn't count anymore. It's all about the state, and strips every individual of individualism, of their own creativity, their initiative, and all the great things that make us individuals. It strips them of that, and makes them automatons who only serve and only believe in the state. Um, that's socialism. That's Marxism. And whenever they take over a country, they implement these most draconian uh, laws and policies I think that the world has ever seen. Now, without question, Nazism was evil. It was profoundly evil, one of the worst evils uh, the world's ever seen. And racism is one of the worst evils that we're battling at the end of time. When Jesus was asked about the signs of the end of the age, one of them, he said, Matthew 24, was that nation would rise against nation. Now, in the Greek, that word translated nation is the Greek word ethnos, from which we derive the English word ethnic. He wasn't talking about countries fighting each other, nations fighting each other. He was talking about ethnic conflict would be one of the worst evils at the end of the age. It is one of the worst evils. Racism is, because it's built upon the foundation of two of the worst evils in fallen man. That is either pride, where we become a racist because we think we're better than others, or fear, where we become racist because we're afraid of people or others that are different from us. And Marxism actually is far worse, far more cruel, far more evil in every profound way you can think of than even Nazism. It's atrocious what the Nazis did in Germany. It's still right-wing extremism, and Nazi, really, it was a combination of right-wing and left-wing. They were socialists too. That's why Nazis stood for National Socialist. And they had this strange mixture, but it wasn't just right-wing. But right-wing, any kind of uh, white supremacy, anything like that, is profoundly evil, because it releases racism. And one of the ultimate evils that has brought more death on the world, into the world, more slaughter of human beings than any other philosophy, religion you want to talk about ever in history. Marxism brought that. Okay, the Nazis probably destroyed 25 million people in World War II. And that's atrocious, atrocious the way they did it. Terrible evil. Marxists killed at least, I think this is a small number. I don't think it measures all of them that the Marxists killed, mostly being their own people. I say that when a Marxist took over a nation, they would kill certain groups, try to wipe out certain groups within that nation. The powerful, they would try to wipe out the powerful, the intellectuals, uh, almost anyone that had any power in the country, even if they had been instrumental in Marxism taking over that country, they would immediately kill them when they took over the country. And the conservative estimates of how many were killed just in the 20th century, not counting this century, but just in the 20th century, it was over 100 million. And I think that's a small number. I think it's a lot more than that because they couldn't measure every country where Marxism took over. And but it was also in some of the most cruel torture that they destroyed people within their nations. First thing they tried to do, Marx said this, Freud said, both Marx and Freud, that, by the way, Marx tried to implement some of Freud's philosophy into Marxism, what he believed the state should be. Both of them admitted to wanting to destroy the nuclear family, the basic family of father, mother, and children together. And they did it in a most terrible, cruel way. They sought to turn the members of every family. This is basic Marxism. He wrote about this. They sought to turn every family member against every other member of the family. Fathers against mothers, mothers against fathers, fathers against children, children against fathers, and mothers against children, and children against mothers. They didn't want anyone affection to be more on any person than it was on the state. Marxists try to make the state the God and the provider of the people and the family, where you will have no allegiance to anyone or anything above the state. And the way they did it, they made heroes out of anyone who would turn in a family member for anti-socialist or anti-Marxist remarks. Many of these lied because they got such huge rewards. And back then, a huge reward could be enough to eat and not starve to death. Stalin starved to death just in the Ukraine region. Tens of millions of his own citizens, of the Soviet Union, of Russia, starved them to death. Listen, starvation is perhaps the most cruel torture there is. It lasts so long. It can take you 50 days or more to starve to death. And it's a cruel, terrible, painful death. And he did it to his people to make food a weapon. Where if any province or any people group anywhere tried to in any way resist him, he would deny them food and they would starve to death. And all over the Soviet Union, they realized you go against Stalin, this is going to be what happens. And it won't just be you, it'll be your whole city, your whole province. He tries to wipe out anyone who was even infected by the thinking of anti-Marxists. It is one of the most terrible systems I could not imagine. Worse than prison, worse than human slavery was. Uh, that you think is no, it couldn't be that bad. Yes, you were a slave of the worst kind. You could be killed for thinking thoughts or being accused of thinking certain ways when it was totally untrue. But if someone accused you of it, you could be tried and condemned and executed. No one was free to even think what they thought was right or wrong. They had to totally adopt what the state said was right or wrong. And that could often change with who was in that position at that time. And the positions were often changing because in Marxism, they would often have purges of the leaders. Stalin killed more leaders. He killed so many of his leaders of his military that when the war broke out against Nazi Germany, he was depleted of leadership. Now, there were some great ones that arose during that time, but if they started getting the people's affection and all because they were great military leaders or something, they could be purged. No one got that but Stalin. No one was to be worshipped but the leader. Now, that was Stalinism. And even after Stalin died, Khrushchev, who took over for Stalin, from Stalin, was one of his leaders had been raised up under Stalinism. And he was one of the leaders in Stalingrad, which totally wiped out one of the Germans' biggest armies. The Sixth Army under Paulus surrounded them and wiped them out. That's part of Khrushchev's leadership. But he was a political leader there, but he greatly influenced military action. But then Khrushchev took over for Stalin when Stalin died. He started right away renouncing the extremes of Stalinism. I know we know Khrushchev is the one who took off his shoe and beat it on the podium of the UN, declaring he's going to wipe out capitalism and all this. And he was a true communist, but he too thought that Stalin had gone way too far in many things. But what Khrushchev was doing was really bad, and what he ended up doing. But I think it was because of the way the system under Marxism, the way you rise in such a system is by kowtowing to the party line, being the most loyal. It's not by being the most brilliant or competent leader. It's by being the most subservient. A lot of ways that you can get in that position and not know a clue, not know anything of what you're doing in leadership. And pretty soon you get paranoid. You don't know how to do this. You think this group's going to try to take your authority or kill you or whatever. Everyone who gets in that position becomes super paranoid, like Stalin did. And his answer to almost everything was to kill more people and make those who are left more subservient, more afraid of bucking the system. It was a terrible thing. But you could not even trust your brothers or sisters, your parents. Parents couldn't trust their children, couldn't trust your neighbors, your fellow workers. You were all alone in the world in a most profound way, so that the only allegiance you would have, and the highest allegiance, would be the state. And that's where Marxism leads in every case. The what kids in our schools today have been indoctrinated with is not true Marxism. It's a propaganda about what Marxism will be and the utopia it's going to bring and all this. But that's never been true. You can prove by history what Marxism is by every single example of when it took over a country. We have to see this. And then we have to understand its strategy. First thing, even Abraham Lincoln said if America is ever destroyed, it will not be by a foreign enemy. Lincoln said he believed America was already strong enough to to defeat any attack on America from a foreign enemy. He said that's not how America's going to fall. It's going to fall by the enemies within. And that's how Marxism seeks to take over and destroy every nation. Find people within that it can work through. Basic military principle, you cannot defeat an enemy that you don't see, that you don't recognize, you don't understand. They may claim to be our friend, but they're not. They're our enemy. And this is why you have to see and discern your enemy to defeat it. I tell you, the enemies within America right now are far more dangerous than the enemies without. You think, well, they don't have nuclear weapons. They don't have a. I'm just saying, they didn't need all that to take over Russia. They didn't need hardly any military strength. They got the army to surrender their weapons to them in exchange for amnesty. And then as soon as they turned their weapons in, the Russian army, they slaughtered them, slaughtered the Russian armies, the Russian soldiers. They could no longer defend themselves from this onslaught. That's why one of the most brilliant it was a letter written to America that appeared in Pravda. It was a long time ago, could have been 30 years ago. I just read it. I occasionally read Pravda, which is the Moscow, Russian main newspaper. Occasionally read it because they were for so long, our adversary. And I tell you, it's wisdom to discern and study the ways of your adversary. So then you can recognize them, whether they come from within or without. And it's usually both. But there was an amazing article appeared in Pravda. I believe it was front page article that was addressed to America. And you know what it said? You know what the title was? America, do not give up your guns. And the entire article was about how Russia had been taken over by the Bolsheviks uh, by getting them to surrender their guns, turn their guns. That's how many countries today are being subdued. And you see them changing. You see them being ruled more and more by fear of their government and all. And this has been done to some great nations on the earth recently, where they turned in all their weapons, supposedly for amnesty. That's not how it works. When you're defenseless, they're going to come get you. Uh, so this letter in Pravda was written to America. Someone needs to look it up. I think I saved it, but I have so many files on my computers and my storage. It's sometimes even using great search engines and all, I have trouble finding things, and I think some of them have been deleted somehow. Uh, but anyway, if I'm sure you can still get that article somewhere. It was supposedly written by Putin. His name was on it. wanting America back then. And in the early days, Putin was really wanting to be a friend of America. And we insulted him so badly, so profoundly. He became one of our worst enemies, but he should have been a friend. And I'm just saying, you go back, a lot of people won't admit that because they've bought into what our media says and what our country indoctrinates its citizens with. But Putin has said and written many brilliant things, but he was warning America, don't give up your guns. You know, in World War II, neither Japan nor Germany ever devised a strategy for invading and taking over America. They had strategies for bombing us on the West Coast and even sending balloons in to bomb us in the interior. They had strategies like that, but they never planned on invading us. They said it would not be possible. The citizens are armed. We don't just fight the army, we're going to have to fight the citizens, everybody there. They said this is not going to be possible. And so they never devised a strategy for invading us as a country. And I believe it, we cannot give up our weapons. Don't ever let them do that. The left will always try to do that because it's basic Marxism. You've got to disarm the people to take them over because they know they're going to do such terrible things, totally dominating and controlling the country, that people that if they were armed, they would rebel. But if they're disarmed, they don't have any power. So I'm just saying, I studied this for many years. When I was young, when I was about 19 years old, I was in the Navy at the time. But I used to go to some of the demonstrations and all that were happening, anti-war demonstrations. I went there because that's where the biggest rock festivals were. They would have all these artists, uh, rock bands and everything come and do concerts on the days leading up to the planned demonstration to attract the people. And that's why they would get most of the people, I believe. That's why they got me. I didn't care anything about the politics, but it was the biggest party in town. And back then, that was my main ambition, to go to them. Uh, so for the party. But I got accosted by a Marxist group at one of those, and they boldly proclaimed they were communists. And you know what got me? They had very nice looking girls recruiting people to come to their meetings. So I said, okay, I'll go listen to what they have to say. And what they said was brilliant. It made beautiful sense. So I was in the Navy at the time when our ship got deployed to the Middle East, and we had to stay for a while in the Mediterranean. I spent almost all my time in the library trying to study. And at that time, I was studying Marxism was one of the main things. I said, well, okay, if I'm going to join this group, I really want to understand what it is. It is the craziest, most bizarre philosophy, anything the world has ever come up with. If you read it, I mean, there is nothing more cruel, more anti-human, more anti-mankind, trying to make men and women, all men and women, just automatons, machines who actually have no value compared to the state. That's why they didn't care about killing millions of their own people. No individual has value. It's the opposite of what we have stood for in America from the beginning. No, every individual has value. Every individual is unique, has the ability to create, to do all this. Without, that to me is more of what it means to be made in God's image than just that we have arms and legs or look like Him physically. I believe He gave us His image as the Creator. I believe there's creativity in every one of us. And nobody should be more creative than those who are getting closer to God, the Creator. He imparts his ways to us. But anyway, Marxism is one of the greatest threats. I believe it is in the book of Revelation. There are two main beasts in the book of Revelation. And these beasts come up out of the earth. Speaks of earthly mindedness. They don't come down from above like the New Jerusalem will, like what God is building does. And but they come up from the earth. Earthly mindedness, humanism, all these things that are rallying together to dominate the world at this time. The two beasts in Revelation are both trying to take over the world. They don't believe what they believe in, their religion or their philosophy, can be successful until they dominate the whole world. I believe one of those beasts is Marxism, the other one is Islam, radical Islam. They don't believe in peace. There can be peace on earth until the whole world has been subdued to Allah. That's what when they say they're a religion of peace, that's what they're talking about. They have a different definition than most of the world has of peace. We think of it as not fighting each other, finding other ways to resolve our differences and whatever, be inclined. They don't do that. They believe in conquest. That's basic. Read their book. Uh, they believe in conquest, jihad, and they believe they have to. That's how they serve their God. Until the world is subdued for Allah, they don't believe there can be peace. So everyone else must either convert to Islam or be killed or enslaved. You can become a slave. And, there's more slaves in Islam today that make slavery. There are more people in slavery today than there were in the 1860s when we had our Civil War, and many pseudo historians, fake historians, claim that we had most slaves of any country on earth. That was never true. But anyway, we did have them, and that was wrong. That was bad, especially when we wrote in our founding documents, all men are created equal. How can you dominate one race or anything over another if you believe that? But anyway, we'll talk about that. But we really need to understand and observe Marxism today. It is terrible. It is cruel. It is anti Semitic. There's a reason, because the devil is very threatened by Jewish people. And he's very threatened by Christians. And you will have to find. But the Jewish people have been under threat of annihilation for over 1,000 years. Most of that time is by pseudo Christians, institutional Christianity, not true Christians. They would never behave that way. This is totally against what Jesus preached, what he stood for, what his kingdom stands for. And, but anyway, we really need to understand the Jewish issue too. And I think of all the groups that have arisen in history with the evil intent of destroying Jews, wiping the Jews off the face of the earth. The Nazis were the most successful so far in being able to kill that many millions of Jews. Well, groups like Hamas, they look up to the Nazis as their example. And they are worse. When you read what they did to the Jews on October 7th, what they did to Jewish babies, cooking them in ovens, things. I mean, they were so perverted in inflicting the worst kind of pain while they were killing people. It was worse than the Nazis. The Nazis tried to use semi-humane gas that was almost painless and odorless and all this, but it would kill you. They wanted to kill them, and that's bad. That's really bad. But they weren't trying to just inflict pain. Now, there were some perverted doctors and no doubt some of those rulers of the camps that were really perverted and evil, who did torture and everything else. But um, what Hamas did was unthinkable. This is beyond human. This is the manifestation of the demonic in human form. And then we have in America today, we have multitudes of children, students in our universities who are rallying and marching for Hamas and against the Jews. Jews have been the most persecuted people on the earth except for Christians. Christians have actually been more so. I'm talking about true Christians who refuse to bow the knee to the Christian institution that had become so antichrist, so the opposite of Christ's nature. The true Christians, of which it is estimated in history that over 50 million of those who refused to bow the knee to a man who claimed to be the head of the church, they were killed, they were executed, they were tortured under the most cruel ways. Get the book, Fox's Book of Martyrs, and read about how that was. It's one of the hardest reading you'll ever do, those terrible tortures and what was done to people and children. It looked like the Hamas spirit, just being as cruel as they possibly could. Well, that's Hamas. And they have the, I mean, they accuse conservative Christians as being Nazis. I mean, this is crazy. When they're out there trying to glorify and uplift and support Hamas that did what they did on October 7th, whether you like the Jews or not, this is over the top evil and cruel and worse than the Nazis. And they claim that the Jews are Nazis. Nobody hates the Nazis more than the Jews because they were the ones who tried to kill all of them and almost succeeded. Do you get what I'm saying? Things are really upside down. You remember when Paul and I think it was Silas came limping into a city? I mean, they must have been in terrible shape physically, all the beatings and stonings and everything else they'd taken. Well, they come leaping into a Roman city, and the Roman officials of the most powerful empire in the world at that time, cried out in terror, saying, "Those who have turned the world upside down have now come here to us." Terrified of what these two crippled people come limping, old people limping into the town, the threat that they were. It wasn't a military threat, it was no physical threat. But they would see that because they saw their world as being right side up. Their world was the one upside down. Christianity didn't turn anything upside down. It did its best to help turn upside down things right side up. The turn, starting with the whole world, is upside down. I'm just saying. But how upside down are things today. When right here in the streets of America, people are marching for Marxism, socialism is just one step. It's almost the highest step in Marxism towards communism, which they claim is the ultimate society and government and all. But could that be? We have to wake up. Now, it's come out recently how leftists are putting together their own militias. They're obviously planning to take this to a new level of violence. And we have to be prepared for this. Now, I know a lot of Christians think, well, we got to turn the other cheek. We can't fight back. Well, that's not what Romans 13 says. It's not what it says even concerns civil governments. It says they are not given the sword for nothing, but to avenge evil. And, civil government would be in disobedience to God if they did not use their military power, whatever military power they have, to avenge evil, to keep evil under control. Now, we know at the end it's going to get out of control. It's going to be the worst time of trouble the world's ever known. But I believe we have to resist it. We have to stand up. We start by speaking. We start on the soapbox. Then we go to the ballot box. And if those don't work, only in the most extreme do we go to the cartridge box. That's what the patriots that fought in the revolution believe. Start with the soapbox. Speak out against these evils. That's what the Black Robe Regiment did. The pastors who, the British generals said they feared pastors more than they did the patriot generals, military leaders, because the pastors were affecting the hearts of the people. Well, anyway, this is just one download I'm going to give you on Marxism. I've got others. We've really got to recognize it. We got to stand up against it. We got to speak out against it. It's encroaching. It's getting bold now. That's because they believe the undercurrent that they have in this country, the surface support that they have is just about ready to make a move for the whole country. And it's not going to be a move at the ballot box. It may be that they've used the ballot box. They say they believe in the vote. They believe every country should have the vote one time. To vote a Marxist in, then no more voting. Uh, but anyway, we're in a very dangerous time, and it's getting more so, that it's getting this blatant and out front is a sign of where they think they are, how close they are, they believe, to seizing control of this country. We got to wake up. We got to do our part. We all have to do our part. Well, thank you for listening to today's rant. By the way, I wrote that book on Marxism to be a simple, straightforward book that can be read in just a few hours. It's decades worth of research on my part, and it wasn't continual for those decades, but I was always, researching these things or continually spending some hours every week. And I tried to condense it into something you can absorb in a couple of hours. If you're a fast reader, you can read that book in 2 hours. Easy. If you're a slow reader, 5 hours. But think about that. 5 hours to absorb what took me years and years. I just condensed it and put it into a form. I've got the 45-point plan that the Marxist USA put out there for how they were going to take over America. And you can see how they did. how effective they were. We'll cover that on one of these rants. But anyway, I thank you for your feedback. And I thank you for all of you who let me know how much you appreciate these rants. If you keep listening, I'll keep doing them. If nobody's listening, I'm not gonna, I've got other things to do. But anyway, so many really like these. I'm going to keep doing them for you as long as you'll listen. Thank you for joining me for today's rant.
Marxism. It is the most evil, deadly, and totalitarian philosophy of government in history. Marxist governments have murdered more than 100 million of their own citizens in the 20th century alone in a sinister effort to purge nonconformists. Today, America faces an unprecedented threat from Marxists entrenched in our universities, our media and entertainment industries, and even in our own government officials. As believers, what can we do about this growing threat? This book exposes the 45-point plan of Marxism for taking over America and offers clear strategy for defeating it to restore America to its true foundations.
There are a lot of people looking for a degree, a bigger ministry, or a platform. But MSU is about Jesus. Morningstar University is a place for you to learn how to abide in Christ, how to encounter Him daily and live with Him through every season of life. It is a place for you to learn how to grow in Scripture, in the Word of God, listening to His every word, to obey Him and do everything He says, and then be able to lead in the Spirit, which means being led by the Spirit in every step you take and listening to His voice to do as He says. Through morning chapel worship, classes deeply rooted in Scripture, real community, and ministry opportunities, you will learn this: to abide, grow, and lead. Because this is what God wants for you. He wants to set your heart ablaze and to create a leader in you for His people. If you are ready to take the next step with God, applications for the 2026-2027 year are open, and you can apply today at mstaru.com.